Hello everyone, welcome you all. Today I am going to explain you about web service interview questions. So this is going to be a very interesting topic. So I'm more concentrating on the tester's point of view. So what are the questions asked in interview for testers? So let's start it. So our first question is, what is a web services? So this is the most common and asked in almost every interview that required for web service testing. So web service is a standard software system used for communication between the two devices, that may be a client and server over an internet, or we can say that exchanging information between the two application over a network. So let's move on to the next question. How does the web services work? So a web services enables communication among the various applications by using open standards such as HTML, XML, WSDL, and SOAP. So you can build a Java based web service on Solaris that is accessible from your Visual Basic programming that runs on the Windows. So this is also one of the very much asked interview question as well. And this is an architecture. So if someone is looking for trying for more than 4+ years experience, so this kind of questions may be expected in that interview. So explain web service architecture. So how does if someone is working on the web service, they need to know at least some information on the architecture. So here we have three different concepts. So we have framework architecture like service provider, service requester, and service registry. So what is service provider? So service provider plays a role to create a web service and makes it accessible to the client application over the internet for their usage, whereas service requester is a basically any consumer of web services like any client based application, or we can say any of the either we are trying to hit some services and getting the responses, so we are called as service requester. And client applications are written in any language. They contact web services for any type of functionality by sending XML request over the available network connection. And what is service registry? So service registry is a centralized directory that helps to locate the web services for the client application. So here we can find the existing web services and we can also create a new one too. And this service provider uses a publish interface for the service registry to make the existing web service available to the client application. And with all information provided by the service registry, the service requester is able to build or invoke the services. So this is what the service architecture web services. So let's move on to next question. So what are the different types of web services available? So mostly this question is very simple, and it has SOAP services and RESTful services. So SOAP is an XML based protocol which accesses the web services, and RESTful is an architecture style but not a protocol. Let's move on to next question. What is a SOAP? And we can have like small introduction to SOAP because we have two different types, right? So one of the type is SOAP. So SOAP is a simple object access protocol. So it is an XML based protocol for an accessing web services, and it is a platform independent and language independent. By using a SOAP you can interact with any other programming applications too. So let's move on to next question. So what are the advantages of SOAP web services? So we need to know about the advantages because SOAP is defines an security which known as WS security. So security point of view, it's a best one, and it's a language independent, so that is also an advantage point where we can call this in any of the different platforms too. And it is a language independent and a platform independent, so we can write any programming language and it can be executed any systems like Windows, Mac operating systems. So let's move on to next question. What are the disadvantages of SOAP web services? Because we have advantages and we have disadvantages too. One of the disadvantages is slowness, because it's slow because it's works on the XML, right? So as I told in the very first question, so it uses a XML format that must be parsed to read and define many standards that must be followed while developing the SOAP application. So it is slow and consumes more bandwidth and resources. And it is a WSDL based system. So it is a WSDL based and do not have any other mechanism to discover the service. So that is also a disadvantage for SOAP. So what is a WSDL? So it is a part of SOAP services, and where WSDL stands for Web Service Description Language, and WSDL is an XML based document that provides the technical details about the software, about the web services, and what all information that WSDL contains. So elements like method name, port type, service endpoint, binding, and method parameters, and other parameters. So let's move on to next question. So what is UDDI? So UDDI stands for Universal Description, Discovery and Integration. So UDDI is a directory of a web service where client application can look up for web services, and web service can register to the UDDI server and make them available to the client application. And WSDL is a part of UDDI. So we need to know about this kind of the standards like WSDL, SOAP, UDID, and XML. So let's move on to next question. So which language is used by UDDI? So UDDI uses a language known as WSDL, so which is a web service description language. Let's move on to next question. So what is RESTful web services? So REST stands for representational state transfer. It is an architectural style and it is not a protocol like SOAP. When web services uses HTTP method to implement the concept of REST architecture, then it is known as a RESTful web services. So REST service and RESTful services. The implementation of this HTTP method in the concept of REST architecture, that is called as RESTful. And web services, in this architecture, the style, data, and the functionality are served as resources and are accessed by URI. So what is a URI? URI is a uniform resource identifier. So let's move to next question. Explain advantages of RESTful web services. So they are considered as a language and platform independent, as this can be written in any programming language and can be executed on any platforms. And REST is an lightweighted protocol and it is considered as fast because of less consumption of bandwidth and resources, and it supports multiple technologies between and different data formats like plain text, XML, and JSON, and it is a loosely coupled implementation, so it can be tested easily over browsers. So let's move to next question. Explain difference between HTTP method supports by RESTful web services. So we need to know what all methods that being supported by RESTful services. So it supports get, which is a read-only access to the resource, and put is an creation of new resources, delete is an removal of resources, and post is an update of an existing resources, and options is a get supported operations on the resources. Head returns the HTTP header only, no body. Let's move to next question. So what are the tools could be used for API testing? So we need to know what all tools available in the market, and whichever interviewer asks this question, they have some standard set of tools that they wanted to know, or on which tool you have worked, and if they are working on the same tool, so that could be easy for you to understand the application. So available softwares like Catalan Studio, Postman, SOAP UI Pro, and APG. So these are all softwares. So currently we have other softwares too, but I listed only few here. Let's move to next question. What are the difference between API testing and UI testing? So API enables communication between two separate software systems, and UI is an user interface. Testing refers to the testing graphical interface, such as how the user interact with an application, testing an application elements like font, images, layouts, etc. And the UI testing basically focused on look and feel of the application, whereas the API is like a working on the backend side, which which sends data and receives some information. And let's move to next question. What is HTTP? So HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So HTTP is the most popular options for service transport, and HTTP is a simple, stable, and widely deployed. And furthermore, most firewall allows HTTP traffic. So let's move to next question. So what is double EEP? So BEEP. So which stands for Blocks Extensible Exchange Protocol. So this is for more than 5 years experience guy question. So this is an alternative of HTTP. So BEP is a new internet engineering task focus and frameworks for building new protocol, and BEEP is an layered directly on the TCPI and includes a number of built-in features including a initial handshake protocol, authentication, security, and error handling. And using a beep, one can create a new protocol for a variety of applications including instant messaging, file transfers, content indexing, and network management. So all these kind of options we can perform. So I can give an example like Wi-Fi, or we can say which have other option like Bluetooth. So these kind of applications. So let's move to next question. What is an XML RPCs? So this is also not an fresher or a normal interview question. So it's an also one of the experienced question too. So XML RPCs are nothing but remote procedure calls. It's a simple protocol that uses XML message to perform RPCs. So requests are encoded in XMLs and sent via HTTP post. And XML responses are embedded in the body of the HTTP response. So let's move on to next question. So what are the difference between HTTP and HTTPS? So HTTP stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol, and we have secure is added to the HTTPS. So almost what is difference in between these two? So HTTP at its most basic, it allows for communication between the different systems, and it's mostly commonly used transfer data from web server to a browser in order to allow the user to view web pages. It's protocol that was used for basically all early websites. So early websites in the sense which is not being pushed to production environment or which is in the lower environments. And HTTP yes is an hypertext transfer protocol secure. So problem with the HTTP protocol is that information that flows from server to the browser is not encrypted correctly. So which means it can be easily stolen. So HTTP yes protocol so remediate this by an SSL. So SSL is an secure socket layer certificate. So which helps create a secure encryption connection between the servers and the browsers, thereby protecting potentially sensitive information from being stolen as it is transferred between the server and the browser. So let's move to next question. So what is an interoperability in a web services? So this is also an high level of priority question, like more than 5+ years guy can experience this question. So web services facilitate various applications to communicate with each other and share data and services among themselves. And other application can also use the web services. For example, VB or .NET application can communicate with a Java web service and vice versa. And web services are used to make the application platform and technology independent, as we have discussed in previous slides, which is an platform independent and language independent. So it provides an interoperability between these different coding languages. So let's move to next question. What are the different types of HTTP status codes available? So we need to know what all status codes, because this is also an asked question for freshers, experienced guy, so all level of candidates can experience this kind of questions. So we need to know what all HTTP status codes available and what are they. So this is an on a high level. So what is an 100 and what all status codes under 100, which is an information. So information, so communication transfer protocol level information. And 2x is a success, so whatever we send request, so we get success, and that indicates that client request was accepted successfully. And 300 and all the 300 related status codes are redirectional, so indicates that client must take some additional actions to order in order to complete their request. And 400 are client errors, so all the 400 related status codes are client errors, and this category of errors status codes pointing that finger at clients. And 500 and all the 500 related status codes are server errors, and these server errors taken responsibility for their status codes. So these kind of server errors need to be fixed at an high priority. So let's go to next slide. So explain status codes of 100 and so. So I have given few 100 status codes like 100, 101, 102, 103. So what is 100? It's a continue, indicates the client that the initial part of request has been received and not yet been rejected by the server, and the client should continue by sending the reminder of the request, or if the request has already been completed or ignored this response. And 101, which is a switching protocol, so sends response to an upgrade request header from the client and indicates that the protocol and the server is switching to. And 102 is a proceeding, so which is a processing, indicates that server has received and it's in process the request, but no response is available yet. And 103 is an early int, so primarily intended to use it with the link headers, and it suggested the user agent that starts preloading the request and resources while the server prepare for final response. So these are all like quick information on this 100 status codes. And let's move to the next slide. So all 200 status codes explain the HTTP status 200 status codes. So all we have here is 200, 201, 203, 204, 205, 6, 7, 8, 226. So these are all the information that we have. So I do provide the link for this all the status codes in the description section, but I will explain you what are most common status codes that we encounter. So most common status codes that we encounter is 200. So any request being hit to the server and we will get all okay, then it says 200 status code. And 201 is created when when the request is succeeded and a new resource has been created as a result, so which is a 201. And 202 is an accepted, indicates that request has been received but not completed yet. It typically uses a long running request and batch processing. So any batch running, so batch runs takes more time to execute entire process, so that requires some time. So it will give you 200 and 202 first, then after it will give you 200, 201. And 203 is also one of the puzzle interview question. So what is the status code 203? So it's a non authoritative information. And we have 206 also the partial content, and 205 is a reset content, and 204 is a no content. So we need to understand all these status codes. So this is as part of all web services interview questions for entry level, or we have 3+ years experience or 5+ years experience. So this kind of questions can be expected. So let's move to next question. So explain HTTP status 300 code. So all we have here all the 300 status codes, but I will explain you one or two in this, because if we may or may not encounter this kind of status codes in web services, but we need to know one or two in this list. So one is 300, so which is a multiple choices, and 301 is moved permanently, and 302 is a found, and 303 is seen other, and 304 is not modified. 305 is user proxy. So 307 is temporarily redirected, or 308 is a permanently redirected. So all these status codes, so we need to know at least there. By seeing the information, we can give some explanation for that. So let's move on to the next question. So explain status code. Status starts with 400. So 400 is also most expected in all the web services once we are into actual testing of web services. So we have 400, it's a bad request. 401 in unauthorized, or 402 is a payment redirect, payment required, and 403 is an forbidden, and 404 is not found. And only this 400 to 404 we will expect in our web services testing, and 405 to 409, 10, 11, 12, 13 we have many, more than 20 plus 400 status codes, but most commonly we required only 400, 401, 402, 403, 404. And I have listed all the status codes here. You can do check out this entire status codes with their description by pausing the video. So let's move on to the next slide. So explain the status codes 500. So this is also an expected behavior in the web services testing, and also as in interviews too. So what all 500 status codes we have? So 500 internal server error, and 501 is not implemented. 502 is a bad gateway. 503 is an service unavailable. 504 is gateway timeout. So these are all repeated kind of questions, or we can say can be expected in our web services testing, and also asked in interview question like what is 403 refers to. It's a service unavailable. So when we are going to get this kind of 503, because whenever any development or any deployment happening during our testing, so we will expect this kind of service unavailable. So that time they will make entire environment down and they will deploy the new code. So all these questions related to 500 status codes. I hope this session is useful for you. In case if you have any questions, do post in my comment section, and do stay tuned to my channel for more videos like this. Thank you.